So today I am with Jonathan Chou, co-founder and CEO of Bee. That's B-E-E, as in Bumblebee. Now, Bee is a project that intends to be the future of home sharing, kind of like decentralized AirBNB on Ethereum. It actually does more than that from what I can see, but that's the quickest way to get your head around the basics. Now, the project is led by former employees of Google, Facebook, Uber, and Civic. So that's some good experience for a project of this nature, if you ask me. Now, Jonathan himself is the ex-Uber employee, and ultimately the Bee platform will allow people to list their homes and then guests to find those homes and book accommodation, kind of like Airbnb. Now, you can find out more at btoken.com, but before I say too much, I'd just like to welcome Jonathan to the Cryptoverse.
Yeah, thank you for having me today.
Very glad to have you, mate. It was another one of your team members that reached out to me originally. It was, is it Min, who's your business development person? Yeah, that's right, yeah. Yeah, so she did a good job. She said she's the ex-Civic employee, is that right? Yeah.
She has an amazing background as well. She came from Civic, which is an extremely popular cryptocurrency company.
Well, to be honest, that's what got my attention, because she said, I left my job at Civic as the head of staffing to join this project. And when I read that, I was like, what project? So I straight away started to look at it and I thought, oh, I like this idea. So let's have you on and have a chat about it, right?
Awesome.
So do you want to give your 30-second overview of how you pitch the idea to people who've never heard of it before?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, BToken is a decentralized Airbnb, and Airbnb is a classic middleman that can be decentralized. So the two value propositions that come with that is, first, there is the traditional problem that traditional companies, as they grow in valuation, all of that appreciation is captured by only the select few, the founders and the VCs. So I like to use Uber, for example. The Uber has grown from 0 to 70 billion in less than a decade. But the Uber drivers who basically create the ecosystem make less and less per year. They started with like 40 and now they make 10. And so it's clear that the whole ecosystem is not aligned. But then if you tokenize the economy and everyone has tokens, then as the network increases, everyone basically wins. So that's the first part.
Okay.
And then the second part is the no commissions. So you essentially remove the middleman and you take the 15 to 20% commission and reduce it to zero.
Okay. That's pretty good. One of the best resources you sent me was this, you called it a pitch deck. It's like a presentation of 22 pages. Each page has a specific goal in mind to communicate something specific about the project or a benefit or a feature or whatever, right? You touched on two big ones there, which we'll get to. But is that right, what you just said there about every year, say an Uber driver, for example, makes a smaller and smaller cut? Is that actually how it's gone down?
It's essentially the case because there's saturation in the market. So of course, when there's not enough supply or demand in the market, then the company will heavily incentivize to do so. But once it becomes more mainstream, then actually the early adopters suffer a bit because there's a lot more people that can replace him or her or do his or her job.
Right. So isn't that just a standard law of economics though, right? When a market is new and fresh, it's like big fat margins, most profitable, first mover advantage, and then that fat profit margins attracts competitors who are willing to do it for slightly less, and then gradually the amount of competition means it turns into a commodity almost, and then the margins are as thin as they can be, almost to sometimes just above cost sometimes. So that's not specific to Uber, is it? That's more of a general law of economics.
Oh, absolutely, and I think that's why blockchain technology is so powerful, not only the technological level but the fundamental level, because when you tokenize any economy and then you give any traditional economy all actors on the economy tokens, then you properly incentivize everyone on the network, right? Because then the founders and VCs still have their tokens, but the Uber driver or the Airbnb host or the guest, they have their tokens as well.
Okay, so this is where the biggest gap is in my understanding about Bee. So let's spend a bit of time talking about the token itself, because that's the bit you've just been talking about as being the key factor in making sure all the incentives are aligned and make sure everyone gets a cut of the value in the ecosystem, right? So what's the token for, right? It's the B token, right? So how's that going to be used in the ecosystem?
Right. So we adopted a model very similar to Binance Exchange. And Binance Exchange is a popular exchange where you can trade your altcoins for each other. But if you use Binance token, then they cut your transaction fees in half.
Right.
And so that's the same way we're using B token. If you use B token on our platform for decentralized home sharing, then we don't charge any commission at all. But then if you use Bitcoin or Ethereum, then we charge a 1 to 2% convenience fee.
Aha. Right. So if you use the private currency that is the B token, no commissions. But if you use a other crypto, then it's 1%. Is that right?
Yep, exactly.
Okay then. Interesting. Very interesting. So there's an incentive to buy the B token and pay with that currency straight away, right? That's a way of bolstering demand for it.
Yes.
Okay. So that's one use for it. Are there any other uses for it in the ecosystem?
Yep, there's a few. So the other part is sponsored listings. So you can think of this like a Yelp business model,
Right.
which if you want to promote your listing higher up the relevance search or even perhaps the front page, they can pay in B token.
Okay, that's a good one. That's actually a very good one. So that's demand coming from a different actor in the ecosystem. So no, it's not, is it? That's still coming from the vendor. So if the vendor wants to avoid the transaction fee, they can accept payment in the B token, whereas if they accept payment in Ethereum, it's 1%. So am I right with that, or is there incentive for the user to use the B token?
Right. So for the on the guest or the host, or you're talking about the sponsored listings, right?
Let's call them guest and host. So the guest is the person that books themselves in. So are they the ones that's going to incur the 1% transaction fee if they pay with Bitcoin or Ethereum?
Yes.
Okay, so that's their incentive to pay with B tokens. Gotcha. Then if we swap over to the host side, that's where the other aspect comes into it, and their incentive is to buy B tokens in order to basically increase the visibility of their property in the listings.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, good. So I'm getting it right in my mind, right? So now we've got two groups of actors in the ecosystem: the guests who would buy the B token because they want to avoid the 1% fee, and then the hosts would buy the B token to spend for advertising on the platform, basically. So, okay, that's clear. That's simple. I like it so far. It seems to work very, very well. That's cool. Have you? I noticed you've done some fundraising so far. Can you talk about that for a bit?
Yeah. So we have a public sale coming up January 31st. Before we had 2 pre-sale rounds, both filled up extremely quickly. So we're really glad the community is very supportive. And I think we raised about 10 million USD up to date.
Yeah, sounds about right.
And we'll be. Go ahead.
Yeah, you're not raising that much money either, are you? I looked at the overall roadmap, and if you sell all your tokens, you're only going for like 15 mil or something, which isn't a huge amount of money compared to a lot of other token sales.
Yeah, so I think we're extremely inspired by early projects such as Neo, Quantum, Ethereum, and all of these tokens. They only raised about 15 to 18 mil at inception.
Okay.
And they've gone it and done extremely well. So for us, we're trying to raise the bare minimum that we need to execute the project, and then go from.
Okay, cool. One thing I wanted to ask you is, are you sure you want to build this on Ethereum? Because like with the scaling issues, and the guests are going to have to pay transaction fees, right? Which is a bit alien to them in terms of, well, I suppose you do. If you go to Airbnb, when you go to the checkout, they have actually started listing the Airbnb fee separately. So I suppose it is kind of similar. That's one of the big things that I think is holding back cryptocurrencies in general and blockchain projects, is that when the user sends the money, they have to pay the transaction fee versus the vendor in a typical credit card model. So that was sort of a 2-part question. Are you sure you want to build it on Ethereum? Is it going to have the capacity to serve your needs?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of exploring on different on-chain or general blockchain solutions, and well, first of all, half of them are Asian, and because we're a Western-speaking like English-speaking company, it's hard for us to like fully understand how to integrate with them smoothly. So that cuts out about half of them temporarily for now until they have better like Western integration. And then the other few we've looked at individually And I think I want to be generic here because some of them have approached us for partnerships, so we don't want to be too explicit.
That's right.
They're I think they're interesting. Some of them are still very early. Some of them are still on testnet, and others we don't quite see the smart contract behavior up to par that we'd expect. So I guess overall we're still pretty bullish on Ethereum as a company, and then the scalability issues we're dealing with an AWS sidechain.
Okay.
And yeah, I do agree that scalability is an issue, and I I think there's I'm hopeful and are I'm pretty hopeful on it being solved. I do see some good stuff in the pipeline that could potentially help quite a bit.
Okay, so you have faith that as the B ecosystem grows, Ethereum will have the capacity there for you at the time, right? So that's fair enough. If that's your position there. How similar or dissimilar is like the B system to Airbnb? Can you draw any similarities or dissimilarities for us?
Yeah, so I would say the similarities would be the ease of use, the understanding of a business model that Airbnb created, and a lot of the familiarity. The differences are, like I mentioned, the shared incentives of the tokenization, a little bit of a change on the payment flow because you would be we're targeting more cryptocurrency, so it's not like we're going against a mainstream market. We're trying to capture the cryptocurrency market. So the difference in flow of, oh, you might have to send your B token or your Ether or your Bitcoin to a specific place, and then also conflict resolution, it will be different because in order to build a decentralized Airbnb or anything really, you can't really have a centralized call center or a centralized cost because you're not really that much. So essentially, then you decentralize that work to the outside or people who are willing to participate for tokens. So I think that part is different too, and there's pros and cons to both. And I think those are the three that I can think of immediately.
Okay, sure. So it uses like an arbitration model, kind of like reminds me of Open Bazaar, because if it's going to be decentralized and then there's I don't know, a judge that does dispute resolution, that's a centralized point, not good, right? So again, back to that pitch deck thing you sent me, there is a bit of an example in that talks about an example dispute and how that would work. It's actually page 13. Arbitration workflow. So it's like the host says, you broke my lamp, and the guest says, no, I didn't. And then the host says, well, I'm submitting this for a dispute, and then it gets escalated, and then a group of arbiters casts a vote. Is this lamp broken? Was it the guest's fault? And then there's a scale from 0 to 100% in order to reach a result of arbitration. So how do you select those arbiters? Is there more than one? Are there just one?
Yeah, so we're planning for a completely randomized model. So in the beginning, we'll bootstrap our network with good actors because we need some initial supply. But as we reach critical mass, the idea is just to have randomized judges.
Okay, that sounds good. Sounds good. Then speaking again about, I think would an arbiter have his own reputation as well?
Yes, so we're currently collecting data on their patterns. My co-founder is an expert in machine learning, and so we're trying to figure out exactly how to qualify if people are acting in essentially fraudulent behavior. I think that's the part we're worried about the most. Mm-hmm. We're not trying to influence you to vote one way or the other, but outright bad actors are what we're trying to remove from the system.
Okay. Now, you've probably answered this already, but I just want to ask it this way to see if I get a different answer. What would you say is the number one shortcoming in the accommodation sharing market? Is it the centralized control? Is it the vendors' fees? What do you think is the number one shortcoming that you aim to solve?
I definitely do think it's the shared incentives. And the reason for this is because without shared incentives, it's really hard to build brand loyalty other than ease of use. But eventually, that moat would be able to be caught up to by other platforms.
That's a good one. Yeah, because then you don't get any one of those key groups within the ecosystem having an exodus, right? If it no longer works for the drivers in Uber, you might get an exodus of those, or if it doesn't work for the hosts, then you might get a lot of those leaving. Whereas if there is a true ecosystem that's equitable, it doesn't lock everyone in, but it locks them in because they'll want to be there rather than having to be there, right? So I think I understand what you're saying on that one. Have you actually spoken to like existing Airbnb vendors and asked them like what their biggest frustrations are and things like that, or have you just analyzed the market objectively?
Yeah. So are you talking about hard financial numbers or just being able to interact with Airbnb current or former Airbnb hosts and employees? And
Yeah, like the actual current hosts, because I mean that's what I would do as a marketing guy. I'd have because they are, well, it's a market, isn't it? So there's two sides of it. There's the guests and the vendors, but there's a lot of demand out there, right? And I think the users have a lower switching cost than the hosts, right? Because I have to relist all of their stuff on the B platform. So what I wonder is like what is the number one biggest frustration or challenge for existing Airbnb vendors that would be the major hook to bring them over to the B platform?
yeah, so I think for us the target segment we're targeting are Airbnb hosts and crypto enthusiasts like that X mark. We're not targeting every Airbnb host, but just the crypto ones. So we've actually a lot of Airbnb hosts through our talks and through our journey. We've been building this product for about 6 months now, and we definitely do plan to launch a flagship product in San Francisco with about 50 Airbnb super hosts.
Okay.
And I think in general the feedback is people are interested in using their cryptocurrency, and they're not really willing to part with their cryptocurrency for much, like not for fiat, not for a lot of things, but for a memorable experience. It's something that they're willing to consider. Yeah. And a lot of the hosts who are also crypto enthusiasts want more crypto.
Of course.
So I think in general the reception has been pretty good. It's more about making sure that it's completely usable, rather than about whether or not they like or dislike the concept.
That's a good one. You see, you've got your market very clearly defined there. That's cool, man. So it's because I'm always like, what's the best way to get some crypto is to earn it, right? So straight away, if you've got you may never have been a host before, but perhaps you might if you can earn some crypto from it, right? So, and like you were saying, people don't want to part with their valuable crypto unless they're getting something of equal or greater value, which, they don't want to trade it for fiat because they see that as inferior value, whereas an experience like an Airbnb or Airbnb have even branched out from accommodation, haven't they, even into tour guides and all kinds of other things, which I imagine you could also do quite easily with the protocol.
Yeah, absolutely. We think the market is good enough here as is, but we definitely are considering it in the future.
Sure. How did the project even come about? Did you have a bad Airbnb experience yourself, or did you get really mad about it and then want to set up a competitor, or what?
Yeah, so I think as an Airbnb guest, I still enjoy using a platform, but I've seen it get progressively less high quality over the years, and then but I think the main motivation is in trying to tackle one of the classic decentralized use cases, because of course decentralized Uber and Airbnb have been talked about so much, even by Vitalik and quite a few other books. So I think it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit we really want to see decentralization of the low hanging fruit or the obvious use cases, and also we see their competition to always be good to a market, and when there's a monopoly in the market, there should always be competition.
Right. What's a superhost?
Sure. So superhosts, they're essentially hosts on the Airbnb platform that have a lot of reviews that really know how the system works. So we see them to be essentially very experienced hosts.
Gotcha. So that's kind of like a power seller on eBay.
Absolutely, it's the same thing. It's a power seller.
Right. What I thought that was for a second there was one thing I've noticed. I agree with you that the quality of the accommodation has gone down over the years. When Airbnb first came out, it was truly the original vision, which was you literally stayed in someone else's home, and that's the percentage of the overall accommodation on the platform, in my experience, has diminished to the point where probably the last 3 or 4 times I've stayed at an Airbnb, it was just a real estate investor that has a bunch of properties that they they don't live in or they never go to, and they just, rent them out on Airbnb as a platform rather than it being what it used to be, which was a spare room in someone's real home, right? So do you think that's got something to do with the accommodation going down in quality?
I definitely do. I think the commoditization of popular platforms just doesn't give it the same feel, and I think for us the main selling point is that we're crypto focused. So when you go to like a new city and you're going to a crypto conference or you're attending an event related to crypto, you want to meet like-minded people, and I think this is where B token can step in.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's actually a good point, because like you said, you're squarely in the crypto industry. People who want to earn it, people who want to spend it. So if you meet a host, he's probably likely to be into crypto as well. So that's a good one. So you've done a couple of like funding rounds. You did the first one I noticed was just with some strategic partners. Then you did like a private pre-sale or something, and then you're going to do a public sale at some point. But overall, how long term, how are you going to sustain the platform? How's it going to fund itself and sustain itself?
Yeah. So for us, we do have what we call a company reserve. So we're keeping 25% of the tokens for future company needs, such as new hires and any other potential funding needs. But our goal is to essentially build a decentralized platform over the next few years, which then other people can contribute to, and we can explore like further, I guess, financial models.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Our main focus is when we look at like cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin or Ethereum, it's not like they're net profitable per transaction.
Right.
So it's not something that we want to impose, but we definitely are making some revenue models. We just don't know what it looks like in a few years.
Sure. When you say like Bitcoin and Ethereum are not net positive profitable, do you mean like if you took it purely on the transaction fees versus the cost of actually doing that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So without the subsidy of new coin creation, it wouldn't work as a business model. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean because the transaction fees are just paid to the miners.
Right.
So I don't think. Well, I guess there's a few ways you can solve it. Like for example, you can solve it with proof of stake, or something along those lines. Right. But it really just depends. I think in general, cryptocurrency is not wildly net based on profits, but rather based on usage. Mm-hmm. So the main concern is to drive up usage and then figure out sustainability.
Right, that's the classic app approach, though, isn't it? Right, you got to get the user base first, because without that, your network doesn't have any value, right?
Yep.
So that's the one. Now, what's the difference between, you have this thing BNest and the B protocol? What's the difference between those two?
Sure. So we view Ethereum as a general blockchain. It doesn't have any bias. It's not meant to build businesses on or anything specific. It's meant to give direct access to the blockchain. And then we have BNest, which is our decentralized home sharing platform at the very top, which is interfacing to mainstream users. And in the middle, there's a lot of technology that needs to be built in order to link Ethereum to this decentralized home sharing platform. And so we call this an application protocol layer, which certain components just have to be built, the infrastructure, and we call those the B protocols.
Okay, gotcha. So this probably leads on to something else I noticed in your materials. You talk about building decentralized apps on B. Like, so what kind of dApps? Is this like the B protocol? The nearest metaphor I can see, and correct me if I'm wrong with this, it's going to work kind of like the 0x protocol does. So are you familiar with 0x?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so yeah, that's like a protocol layer for decentralized exchanges, right? So when I read about B and its decentralized apps, I thought, okay, so what you're going to do with the B protocol is create all the shared functionality that a sharing economy site might want to use, and then the specific implementations of that, i.e. decentralized Uber, decentralized Airbnb, or whatever, they would be the dApps built on the protocol and then sharing that core code, which means they don't have to reinvent the wheel. How far off am I?
That's exactly right. So our protocols are called the PAR protocols, and they stand for payments, arbitration, and reputation. And essentially, it's an all-in-one package that if any other company needs to use something similar with a similar feature set, they can just plug right into these protocols, as opposed to reinvent the wheel over and over again.
Right, exactly. And I did this presentation on decentralized exchange, and that was the metaphor that I used. Like Ether Delta kind of built everything from the ground up. They reinvented the wheel. And then 0x was like, well, we don't need to do that. If someone else wants to build a decentralized exchange, they're going to have to do all that work that Ether Delta did all over again. So let's not have that. Let's have a protocol built on Ethereum that then allows much easier development of decentralized exchanges. So does that mean then with the B protocol that those other apps that would be built on it would also use the B token and be part of the overall ecosystem?
Yeah, so one of the ways we want to do it is to commission out B token in that way, or our protocols in that way, so we can take a small 1-2% fee to continue fueling our ecosystem. So we definitely are looking into ways to be able to incorporate B token to their token, perhaps like a percentage of a swap in the very beginning, and then let everything run with the B token, because we want the B token to be kind of like the gas to Ethereum. That's to be for our protocols.
Right. So I missed a bit there. You said something about a 1 to 2% fee. Would that be what you would charge the dApps for use of the protocol layer?
Yes, that's what we're thinking. We think it would be an amazing like licensing fee.
Right, absolutely, because you need some funds to evolve it, right? So
yeah, exactly.
Cool. Right, I think that is all the major points I wanted to make. So is there anything I've missed that you want to make sure we talked about?
I think this is great.
Okay, great, mate. So where would you want to point people if they want to go and find out more about the project and yourself and your team?
Sure, yeah. Well, definitely like to thank the team and community. They're everything to B token. And if anyone is interested in finding out more, our website is btoken.com, B as in BEE, and we're also really active on Telegram.
Excellent. Well, I've enjoyed speaking to you, Jonathan. So thanks very much for being on the Cryptoverse today.
Cool. Thank you for having me.